right, so the time is now 5:30 and we are officially live. So I want to thank everyone who took the time to register and join us tonight. So good evening, everyone, and welcome to our Asian American Pacific Islander Alumni After Hour. My name is Melita Cruz, and I'm the Donor Engagement Officer at CCRI, where I lead alumni relations, communications, and events at the college. And once again, I thank you all for joining us tonight. And on behalf of the CCRI Alumni Association, we welcome you to this event. Now, unfortunately, Bobby Gondola, our AVP for Institutional Advancement, could not join us tonight. However, he is one of our main supporters of this work, and he's actively involved in advancing our college's equity agenda. So shout out to Bobby, who couldn't make it tonight, but he definitely is involved in this work, and we thank him for his service. Now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our two alum guest speakers. So tonight we have Aia Labja. She is a member of the class of 2015, and she is currently a marketing analyst at CVS Health. And we also are proud to have Malida Khim, who is our member of CCRI's Alumni Association, and she's also a diversity inclusion specialist at IGT. So we definitely are excited to have this conversation today. And without further ado, we'll get started with our questions we have for the program. So I'd like to begin by introducing Aya. Now, Aya, I'm going to be asking you a series of questions, and then I'll also ask you the same question, Melita, and we'll take turns answering, right? So, Aya, for the first question, I wanted to ask, what is your background and experience? So, could you tell the audience here a bit about your background?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Aya. I'm currently the marketing analyst from CVS Health. Just to give you a little background of my current role at CVS, our department or our team, we design and implement marketing campaigns which are focused on the email channel. If you're a customer at CVS and if you have that little extra care card when you stop by the pharmacy, our team or our department handles sending out emails for our loyal customers. So I'm a part of the loyalty and personalization program of the extra care of CVS. So my day-to-day job entails email proofing, customer targeting, tracking, marketing campaign errors, and total deployment of the emails. In my previous roles before CVS Health, I've always been a marketing project manager. In my previous roles before CVS, it's funny because it's a totally different world with my shift to CVS being a Fortune 5 company. In my previous roles, I've always worked with small to medium-sized businesses, especially in Rhode Island. In my previous roles, I was the marketing project manager for a small local restaurant, actually a top restaurant in Rhode Island, India. After that, I worked at Banneker Supply Chain Solutions, which is a supply chain logistics company in North Smithfield. It's totally a bigger shift because from a small to medium-sized businesses, here I am with a Fortune 5 company. Very happy with my role right now. And yeah, I joined CCRI last September of 2014, and I graduated in May 2015 with a degree in general studies. So.
All right, excellent. Thank you, Aya, for that. Now, Melita will ask you the same question. If you could please tell the audience a bit about your background and experience.
Yeah, first, thank you, Millie, for inviting me to speak. And Aya, such a wonderful opportunity to meet you. So my name is Melita, and as Millie shared, I graduated CCRI in 2019. I did graduate with an associate's degree in business administration. My current role is at IGT, the global leader in gaming. If you are still in Rhode Island, you might know our glass building in the middle of Providence, across the street from the Providence Space Mall. My current role at IGT is as a diversity and inclusion specialist. So what I do is I manage all of our diversity and inclusion groups. So those are groups that are focused around dimensions of diversity. So we have groups that are focused on people of African descent, focus on people who are above the age of 50, for military veterans, for people with disabilities, for our LGBTQ folks, as well as women. Tomorrow you'll hear on LinkedIn about another exciting group that is going to launch. So wait for that one. That's really exciting, and I hope you see that on LinkedIn. My day-to-day is really working with all of these groups to make their goals come true and make our environment and community within IGT even more inclusive and a space where employees can really come to work and be their authentic selves.
All right, great. Thank you, Melita, for that. Now, for the next question, I'll go back to you, Aya. So my question is, what did you do while at and following CCRI? Oh, I think you're on mute, Aya.
That happens all the time. Anyway, so before I dive into that, I'd like to give you folks a background of my journey going into the United States when that was exactly 10 years ago. So I came here to the United States 10 years ago without knowing anybody. It was by myself and my 2 luggage. So I came to the United States. I was in a J1 visa and I worked in Holiday Inn Express in Newport, Rhode Island. After that, I spent a year and I came back again to the US last 2014 to pursue studies. And that's how I landed at CCRI last September 2014. I did my associates in general studies with mainly the goal of pursuing my master's degree right after that. So I graduated from CCRI in May 2015. And during my time at CCRI, I was actually a peer tutor at the Student Success Center. Definitely a fun and enjoyable time as I tackled and helped a lot of students with their journey in, learning math and furthering their education. So that was totally rewarding for me. After CCRI, I attended Johnson Wales University, and that's when I did my master's in business. So I finished my MBA from Johnson Wales University last November of 2017. Definitely fun times at CCRI. I definitely felt I belonged, and I definitely felt welcomed. I'd like to mention my previous advisor at CCRI, Rob Jovino. He was definitely a key player when I was in CCRI because not knowing anybody and with all his support and the entire admissions department team, that was huge for me. So CCRI definitely opened a lot of doors for me when I was a student. So.
Oh, thank you for sharing that, Aya. So Rob Giovino is still working at CCRI, so we'll be sure to let him know that he inspired you. That's great to know. So now, same question to you, Melita. So what did you do while at and following CCRI?
Yeah, so I didn't have the traditional college journey. I started at CCRI right when I was the second that I could after I got my GED. And I actually took about roughly 10 years to get my associate's degree, which meant that I had the opportunity to take classes at the Liston campus, the Flanagan campus, the Knight campus, as well as some of our distance learning options. And something I have in common with you, Aya, is I was also a peer tutor at CCRI. So I tutored our accounting students. So similar topics. And I think that there's kind of a coincidental thing going on there with stereotypes in Asian people. And we're talking about how we tutored math related topics, but I'll put that to the side. So at CCRI, I did enjoy my time there, really enjoyed the fact that CCRI allows so much flexibility. And something that I did while I was at CCRI, I actually wasn't directly involved, but my sister went to CCRI as well. And when I would go to pick her up, it would always be from the anime club in the Warwick campus. And so I would sit around and join their conversations. And that was a really, really fun thing for me. It was something that I had never experienced before. I never knew that there could be anime clubs. And it was a really nice opportunity to meet other students. And it was a really good place to meet a lot of other Asian students as well. I think there was a part of your question that asked what I've done after CCRI, right, Millie?
Oh, I can certainly repeat the question,
Okay.
Melita. So the question was, what did you do while at and following CCRI?
Okay, yep. So after I graduated CCRI, I graduated in 2019, so I was already working at IGT. So I actually started in IGT about 6 years ago now. And when I started at the company, I actually started as our food services assistant in the Providence office. After about 2 years, I was nominated for an emerging leaders program within the company. And it was from that program that I gained the knowledge on personal brands and the confidence to advocate for myself. It was because of that confidence that I was able to apply for a position within our HR organization, which we call People in Transformation. And I was a program coordinator for a few of our teams within our People in Transformation organization. It was through that I gained exposure to our diversity and inclusion team, and learned about our diversity and inclusion groups. Definitely learned what it was like to have a life in corporate in America. And then I was really given the wonderful opportunity to grow under the guidance of our VP of Diversity and Inclusion. I'll give my shout out to Kim, because I know that she's on the line and she's also a member of our CCRI Foundation. So thank you, Kim. I was able to really, really grow under her and become the person that I am today as our diversity and inclusion specialist.
Yes, thank you, Melita, for sharing that. And yes, thank you, Kim Lee, one of our trustees, for being present here tonight. We appreciate you, Kim. Now, the next question back to you, Aya, which is, would you be willing to talk about your personal Asian heritage and experience growing up? So could you tell us a bit about your heritage and your experience being from the Philippines?
Sure. So as a child, I was taught not to talk back, to be always respectful and be mindful of others. As you may all know or may not know, we as Asians, we are extremely collective. We have strong family values, and we're taught since childhood to give a sense of putting others first. My family definitely put extreme value in education. I didn't grow up having everything that I have right now. So it's definitely, I don't know, a typical rags to riches journey. We call this riches. Definitely taught a lot about the value of saving money and not being wasteful. Just to give you an example, during like the COVID-19, if you folks travel to Asian countries like South Korea and Japan, they wear masks even without the COVID. They wear masks during the spring or fall season, not because they just don't want to get sick. They don't want others to get sick. So that's an example of the kind of Asian values and culture that was instilled in me and my family. Another thing about an Asian culture taught me is to always respect and honor the authorities. We definitely always have a sense of duties to our families, bring honor to the family. If you folks are familiar with Mulan, it's a Disney movie, but it's cartoons, but that's definitely like the values of an Asian culture there. I would say though that there's always a drawback in those kind of situations. There's definitely a repeated racial trauma, and the situations in the childhood of a typical Asian Asian child. It prevents us from speaking up and making our voices heard. So that's one drawback. So.
All right, thank you for sharing that, Aya. Now I'll ask you, Melita, the same question. So would you be willing to talk about your personal Asian heritage and experience growing up?
Yeah, so I was actually born in California. I moved over to Rhode Island when I was about 6 years old, but my parents were Cambodian refugees who came to the United States in the 80s. So they were escaping the genocide that was happening in Cambodia. And so I grew up with all of the stories that they had of, starvation, losing their family, the war, the killings. And it took me a long time to realize the importance of those stories. And I always thought that I had a pretty good childhood. I didn't think that I had a lot of drama. But as an adult and as a parent myself now, I see where I was lacking. And I also see the reasons for my parents' decisions. So I'm one out of 6 kids, and my parents, for the most part, were never home. I always said that my mom was lucky that we were such good kids because we had essentially no supervision throughout the day. We would go to school, come home, and we were like lucky kids, right? We would come home and no parents would be there. My mom would make sure there was food available before she went to work, but she wouldn't be home until like 11 p.m. at night. And I thought, oh, this is great. I don't have to listen to my parents lecturing me. And I felt like I had freedom, although I didn't use it. I didn't go out. I didn't go and have parties with my friends or anything like that. But I do realize now that, my parents weren't there because they came to the United States as immigrants, because they had to work so much, so many long hours and so hard to make a living and support their 6 kids. So that's a big part of how I grew up. I didn't know how I was supposed to be treated and what was right or wrong as far as that piece. So, people wouldn't always be nice to me. And I definitely had a lot of explaining when it came to where I came from. A lot of kids don't know what Cambodia is or where it is. And it's hard as a first grader in Rhode Island trying to explain that I'm Cambodian and that it's not in China and that it's a different country and that I can both be Cambodian and Asian. So there was a lot of educating that I had to do as a young child. And I think that's probably part of why I'm so patient now as an adult, really understanding that, sometimes people just don't know, and all they need is a little bit of that education.
Yes, thank you for sharing that, Melita. Now, the next question goes to you, Aya. So during the pandemic, there has been an increased number of hate crimes toward Asian Americans. Could you share a bit about your own perspective and how we can address equity and racial injustice?
Thank you for that question. So for many Asian American children, and I'm speaking on my behalf, our life's mission is to always make our parents proud. I get that to me, that really is. So that results in seeking others' approval, always seeking validation, always caring what others think about us. Like our image to the public should always be dazzling. There's always a cultural norm about Asian Americans that we are the model minority, meaning it's always often assumed that we've always made it or we're successful and we already made it. We're already wealthy. Like we don't need much help. We don't need our voices heard. But there's a lot of definitely stereotypes to that, and there's not a lot of truth into that. It's funny because last night I was reading this article from Wealth Progress, AmericanWealthProgress.org, it says there that the disparity between wealth inequality in Asian Americans it's totally bigger than the white folks. So there's definitely a sense of wealth disparity between Asians. So the stereotypes that Asians already made it is definitely not true. I just wanted to share as well, professionally and work-wise, that, you know, as Asian Americans, we're always told that, you know, if we behave accordingly and if we try to fit in the society and if we work hard enough, we will finally be seen as equals. So there's always that, the stigma, I guess, like wherever we go. So.
Yes, great point. Thank you, Aya. And same to you, Melita, same question. During the pandemic, there has been an increased number of hate crimes towards Asian Americans. Could you share a bit about your own perspective and how we can address equity and racial injustice?
Yeah. So first, I like to say that I don't know for sure that there has been an increase in hate crimes. There's been an increase in reported hate crimes towards Asian Americans, because with social media, right, people are able to more easily access the news of Asian Americans, you know, being discriminated against and being victims of hate crimes. From my perspective and experience, hate crimes to Asian Americans has always happened. You know, when my parents came to America and they couldn't speak English, I know my father, as an example, tried to open up a mechanic business fixing cars. And because of his lack of English abilities, he was taken advantage of and essentially lost the business. And, you know, as a young child, you know, I remember having neighbors in Rhode Island for the first time where they were constantly throwing things across the fence at us, making fun of me and my siblings, you know, saying really rude things to us. So I know that it has always happened, and it's just that it's more prominent in our news today. I say that as far as what we can do about it, primarily it would be educating ourselves. So as Aya mentioned, right, we're this big community, but we're all very different, right, depending on what country you come from. So I think it's important to, one, learn about the different cultures within Asian communities. So, right, my Cambodian culture is very different from Aya's Filipino culture, and very different from that of the Japanese culture and Chinese culture. There are some things that cross over, like most of our cultures have some sort of like bao sandwich, right? But for the most part, you know, we are different. We speak different languages. We eat different foods. The rice is probably the main thing that's in common. But, you know, I always say that with Cambodian food, we have like one thing that was authentically ours, and then everything else we kind of stole from the other countries and made our own. and so I think educating yourself first that on the fact that Asian Americans, you know, are all coming from different places, are all at different parts of their lives. Some folks have been here for generations. Other folks are first generation of Asian Americans. And so their wealth and status of life are all different. And then ultimately it all comes down to just kindness, right? So once you educate yourself, and whether you're educated on Asian culture or not, I think generally we should just always be kind to one another. So as long as, you know, someone is not hurting another person, you should always treat the other person with respect, right?
Yes, very well said. Thank you, Melita. Now, the next question goes back to you, Aya. So, how do you share your Asian heritage at work with friends and in the community?
That's a great question. Definitely, as I continue my journey, not only personally, but professionally, I've been discovering that the strengths that attach me closely with my culture are associated with the good memories and the fun memories that I made with my families back home. And these are some examples are, the act of gathering through festivities, creating food, inviting friends over, introducing our culture, introducing our food. I think everyone will agree that food really brings everyone together in a more positive manner. So I try, like, my family and I, we try to do that often. It's funny because when you actually lump us Asians together, you'll be surprised of all like the cool stories that we have. Like, just hearing now from Melita, like all the fun stuff that she did like growing up. We really have cool stories to tell, and we are so willing and so enthusiastically we want to share that with everybody. So my I think my take is just talk to us. Like, we have definitely a lot of stories to share and fun memories to make with you folks. So yeah.
Yes, I agree with that. That food brings everyone together. So great point, Aya. Now the question goes to you, Melita. So how do you share your Asian heritage at work with friends and in the community?
Yeah, before I answer that, I actually wanted to add on to something that Aya said a little bit earlier and then just now as well. So earlier, Aya mentioned that we grew up essentially being told to stay quiet and not talk back, and that has caused a lot of Asian Americans, especially Asian women, to grow up without much of a voice. And so, to Aya's point, right, ask us, because it's not really ingrained in us to just start talking about it ourselves, because that goes against essentially what we were raised to do. So to directly answer the question now, what I do at work, actually something that I did really, really recently, yesterday, is our diversity and inclusion groups have been hosting mental health awareness sessions throughout the month of May, and I joined our session yesterday with our ACET IGT group to talk about my experience with race, trauma, and healing. So that was the first time that I've shared my personal stories of being an Asian American with my colleagues. And I say is probably the first step that I'll be taking, that I've taken with my colleagues to share my Asian heritage. And I really, really hope to continue sharing those stories and really helping anyone within the organization and in the community any way that I can.
Yes, thank you. Very well said, Melita. Now, the next question goes back to you, Aya. So, what has been your experience networking with people of color in our communities?
I would say people of color in our communities are definitely more welcoming. There's a lot of patterns where we could definitely relate towards each other. There's definitely a lot of interesting stories to share. Mainly simply because there's always that common denominator that we're people of color. What you're experiencing or what the other person experiencing, I've experienced that as well, but in just a different manner. I would say like the main key thing in networking is just, I guess, putting yourself out there. Like, as what Melita pointed out, we're actually not ingrained to just be aggressive, like just to approach, which I'm trying to learn now, time and time. As I go along in my professional journey, I'm now like really, really learning to like speak up. And like if you don't know anything, like the answer, I mean, if you don't ask, the answer will always be no. So I always have that statement in my head now. So like, if you don't ask, the answer is just no. So just ask. The worst thing that they could say is just no, you can't do that. So okay, I can't do that then. So yeah, definitely interesting part of networking is because people are welcoming. I mean, from my experience, it really is. I've worked with really diverse group of people, not just right now, but even in the past. So I guess I'm lucky in that sense. So yeah.
All right, thank you, Aya. And same question to you, Melita. So what has been your experience networking with people of color in our communities?
And so I actually started my career journey in nonprofit organizations when I was 16 years old. I was a youth volunteer at a local nonprofit organization in Providence. And that was definitely a great experience for me. And being in Providence, it was more prevalent to be surrounded with people of color. And really similarly to Aya, you know, when you're new to a space, you really appreciate those connections that you have with other people, especially when you show up in your day-to-day spaces as potentially the only. So when you know, I would go to school, I would be the only Asian person in my class, but then I could go to you know, the nonprofit organization and be surrounded by people of color, and that intersectionality is really there. While the exact experiences are you know, different to each individual, it's nice to have a space where you feel a little bit more comfortable and amongst your peers, where it doesn't feel like you stand out so much. So networking amongst people of color is always great. You know, whether you're a person of color or not, I highly advise that you know, you surround yourself with people that look very different from you, and have all sorts of different backgrounds and ideas and ways of thinking.
All right, great point. Thank you, Melita. So for the last question of the night, I would like to ask Aya. So if you could give our students today one single piece of advice or thing to consider regarding Asian heritage, what would it be?
Wow. From my experience, and I'm still internalizing this, even like as me, like myself, I would say just stop searching for a place where you feel like you will belong in, because perhaps it's in the middle where you actually belong. It's in the middle wherein you will forever enjoy the privileges of simultaneously being in both of the best worlds. Because I tried to do that. I tried to do that in the past, in school, at work. I tried to, okay, maybe I should try this one. Maybe I should be on this side of the world. But no, now as I mature more and grew more professionally, I've learned that, you know what, I'm going to embrace the best of the both worlds. And if I will have the opportunity actually to speak to the younger version of myself, let's say I can speak up on like a college orientation, like talking about like 10, 15 years ago, I'd say something along the lines like, you know, I'm Filipino, I'm Asian American too, but you know, I'm also American, and I'm Aya. So that's who I am. So it's totally a mix of everything.
All right, thank you, Aya, for sharing that. Now, Melita, same question. So if you could give our students a single piece of advice or thing to consider regarding Asian heritage, what would it be?
It would definitely be to advocate for yourself. So especially as an Asian American, as we've said multiple times now, that it's not something that we were raised to do. It's something that's really hard to do. But if you don't advocate for yourself, then the world will continue to have their own narrative. And you are the only one that can change your own narrative. So really being able to advocate for yourself, what you want, you know, go for that job, even if you don't think that you reach all of those qualifications. You don't know how amazing you might be. And sometimes it takes that that interviewing manager to see it where you might not see it. And then you get this amazing role, and then your manager cultivates you and is so amazing and helps you to see all of your potential, and then joins when you have speaking opportunities at CCRI.
Yes, that's a great point. Thank you, Melita. So, any final words, Aya? Anything you would like to tell our students who are currently taking classes, or those of you who just graduated? Any other advice you would like to give, Aya?
Sure, and this is also my advice to myself. Again, if you don't ask, the answer will always be no. Always go after what you want. You're always worth it, and always know your value. Because as what Melita said, advocate for yourself. Or like if you're not going to see your value, no one else will. So.
Yes, excellent. Thank you, Aya. And how about you, Melita? Any final words you would like to tell our students, recent alums?
Don't give up. You know, if there are always going to be obstacles. So I think about my journey through CCRI, my continued journey with CCRI. But you know, I started CCRI in a place where, for me, I felt like I was quitting because I dropped out of high school and then got my GED. So that for me felt like a quitting spot. But I continued on. I continued on to go get my GED as soon as I could, and then enrolled into CCRI as soon as I could. And as life threw its curveballs, I started out at CCRI as a full-time student, taking as many classes as I possibly could. And then I got pregnant, and then I reduced the amount of classes that I was taking. But I continued taking those classes. And as hard as life felt, I just kept going. It may not have been full semesters every single time, but I didn't give up. And eventually I got there. I walked across that stage, I shook the hands, I took the photo with my degree, and it was amazing. So don't give up.
Yes, very inspiring. Thank you, Melita. So at this moment, this concludes the event. So I really like to thank you, Aya, and you, Melita, for taking the time to really share your story with our students and alums. And we're very grateful, and you guys are really an example of what it's like to be a successful CCRI alum. So definitely thank you. And we also thank the audience for taking the time to join us tonight. I know some of you are probably all zoomed out, but you nevertheless decided to join this important conversation. So once again, on behalf of the CCRI community, we thank you. We do have several series of our alumni after hours, and this one happened to be one of them. So we hope that you'll join us for future CCRI alumni after hour events. And I hope you all stay safe with this pandemic. Please, if you haven't gone outside, take the time to enjoy the fresh air. It's beautiful out. But thank you very much once again, and I hope you all have a wonderful night. Thank you, Aya, and thank you, Melita.
Thank you.
Thank you, Millie. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Take care, everyone. Good
Bye.
night. Bye.